Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week, well, on screen at the moment you can see the sun rising from a few days ago. This week was the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. In some parts of the world, some people, not everybody, but a few people have a tradition perhaps of watching the sunrise on certain days of the year. So when I lived in Japan, a few people, especially maybe older generations, would sometimes get up early to watch the sunrise on New Year's Day. It's just a symbolic thing. It's sort of welcoming in the new year, the start of the new year, that type of thing. For me, it's maybe more around the solstice, is when I would be interested in seeing the sunrise. On the summer solstice, winter solstice, those type of things, those sort of days of the year. It's not a bad thing to have these little traditions during the year. It doesn't have to be sunrise, of course. It could be whatever. Some people it's religious ceremonies or family traditions, whatever it is. I think these are good things to have in life. But anyway, you might be thinking, what's all of this got to do with art? This is going to be one of those videos where I spend probably 3/4 of the video just trying to get to the main point. But we will get there eventually, hopefully. You will see me doing some landscape paintings during the video. I'll quickly mention what I was trying to do. So I put down some watercolor, not a full painting, just a bit of watercolor on some multimedia paper. And then once that had dried, I put some soft pastel down on top of it. It's basically an experiment. And we'll come back and talk about this in the latter part of the video. There's 2 points in this video that I want to make. So we get back to the rambling part for the first point of the video. When I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, I decided, it might have been younger, anyway, I decided that I was going to learn my way around the night sky. I would be able to recognize all the main stars, the brighter stars, and the patterns, the constellations. I would be able to point and say, that up there, that is the planet Mars, or it's Jupiter, or that's the constellation Orion, or something like that. So, as I've said before, in those ancient times when I was young, we didn't have the internet, but we did have some books. And I remember getting a book. It was either for my birthday or for Christmas or something. It was called something like the Astronomy Yearbook. And it had 2 sections. In the front section, it had some star maps and some information about when and where to see planets during that year. And then the second half of the book was sort of general articles about space, science, astronomy, that type of thing. So anyway, I used those maps. First of all, I had to figure out what the maps actually were and how you use them, because they were quite abstract. But once I had figured it out, I could then start to learn my way around the night sky. I could recognize the different constellations. Back in those days, the sky was a lot darker. There wasn't as much artificial light pollution. I was a lot younger and my eyes were better as well, so I could see a lot of these stars and constellations. You might think it's not the most practical skill to have. You're probably correct, it's not. Maybe if you were lost in the desert, and as long as it's in the northern hemisphere, it's at night and there's a clear sky, I can tell you which way is north. And if you know which way is north, then you know which way is south, east, and west. Now, if you're lost in the desert and you don't know the best direction to travel in, knowing that that's north or that's south isn't maybe that much useful to you. But yeah, at least I can say that's north. So we're now sort of getting on to the main point of the video. So it's the idea of being lost. Maybe when you're getting started with art, you're getting back into art, or maybe even you've been doing art now for a year or two, but you're still feeling a bit lost. that might be because you don't have a direction to travel in. You don't know what direction you want to go in. Like I say, it was quite a labored way of getting to that point, but maybe it was an interesting story for some people. But getting back to the art, if you're feeling lost, you don't know which way to go in, how can you make progress in your art? How do you know if you're making progress in your art? For me, I chose Impressionism. It was something that I loved and something I wanted to try and recreate in my own kind of way. So I wasn't copying as such any particular artist. I was just that sort of style, that Impressionist look, that sort of style that they had, especially in the early days of Impressionism, and that's what I wanted to try and recreate my own way. But it meant I had a direction to travel in. And over time, I did change that direction a bit. That's fine. You don't have to stick to one thing. You can change your mind halfway through. But the thing is, as long as you always have a direction to travel in, you feel as though you're going somewhere. You feel as though maybe you're making some progress towards that goal. If you don't, if you're just doing this style and then that style and this and that and different subject matters and things, I don't know if it depends on your personality, I suppose. But for some people, you might have a permanent feeling of being lost and not having any direction in your art. So that's the first point I wanted to make then. It was a long way of getting there, but have a direction. Choose something. It doesn't have to be a specific style like Impressionism or Cubism or something like that. It could be something a bit more, for example, abstraction. How much abstraction do you want to put into your art? If you imagine it as like a spectrum, we have two extremes. At one end of the spectrum, we have something like photorealism, which really has very little, if any, abstraction. The whole goal of photorealism is to paint something that looks like your photographic reference. So you're basically just taking the information from the photographic reference and reproducing it in oil paint or whatever it is on a canvas or a piece of paper. So there isn't really there's no creativity or individuality. That's not the point of that type of art. That type of art is much more about the technical stuff. So color theory, perspective, learning how to use your medium to reproduce certain shapes and styles and all of those things. That's really the emphasis of photorealism. At the other end of the spectrum, you might have something like a Jackson Pollock painting, which, and no offense to anybody who does those sort of abstract paintings, but they don't have the same level of technical requirement, let's put it that way, that something like photorealism has. When you're doing those sort of abstract paintings, you don't really need to worry as much about things like perspective. And Jackson Pollock dripped paint, he flung the paint, he splashed the paint onto the canvas. His type of art had a focus on a different thing. His art focused on individuality and creativity, things like that. So it's not that his type of art was inferior to the more technical type of art. It was just different. It was different emphasis. Anyway, the point I'm sort of trying to make was you can choose whereabouts on that spectrum you want to be. Do you want to be at the Jackson Pollock end of the spectrum or the photorealism end of the spectrum, or somewhere in between? How much abstraction do you want to include in your art? Once you've made decisions like that, again, you have a direction that you can travel in. You have a goal to aim for, and you can measure progress that you're making. So that's the first point of this video. As I said, it took a while to get there, but the second point is, well, the thing that you saw me doing in the video was, as I said, trying to do some soft pastel on top of some watercolor. It was just an experiment, just to see what would happen. And that's the second point then. When you're getting started, even when you've been doing art for a while, experimenting, trying things, pushing at your boundaries, learning new things, this is very important as well, I think. It will really help you to make progress. And experimenting, so if you end up with paintings that you like, you could say the experiment was successful. In this case, I ended up with two paintings that I don't like, or they're not my favorites anyway, but it's still successful. Ending up with something you don't like does not negate the validity of experimenting. An experiment that produces something you don't like is still a successful experiment, in my opinion, because you're learning something about what you like and what you don't like, and you can start to think, well, I won't do that, I'll try doing something else instead. Anyway, those were the 2 points that I wanted to make in the video. Hopefully it was interesting and of some use to somebody. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you in next week's video.